The sun was already high over the dusty main street of Willow Bend, a town so small it barely made a mark on the map. The air shimmered with heat, and the only sounds were the distant clatter of a blacksmith's hammer and the lazy buzz of flies. It was the kind of day when nothing much happened, except today something would. At the edge of the town square, a small crowd had gathered outside the old auction barn. Most days it was cattle or horses up for bid, but today the whispers were different. Today it was a person, a woman, standing alone on the wooden platform, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if she could will herself away from this place. Her name was Ada Lane. She wore a faded blue dress, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. There was a quiet dignity in the way she stood, even as the auctioneer called for bids. But there was also a sadness, a heaviness in her eyes that no one could miss. The auctioneer's voice rang out sharp and impatient. "Who will start the bidding for this fine young lady? She's strong, she's honest, and she's in need of a good home. Who will give me $5? The crowd shifted, some men looking away, others whispering behind their hands. Ada's cheeks flushed, but she didn't lower her gaze. She stood tall, refusing to let shame take her. A voice called from the back, low and steady. $1, heads turned. The speaker was a rancher, Eli McAllister, known for his quiet ways and the sprawling land he worked alone. He was a man who kept to himself, but his word was good and his eyes were kind. The auctioneer frowned. $1? Come now, folks, surely she's worth more than that. No one else spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Eli stepped forward, his boots raising little puffs of dust. $1. That's my offer. The auctioneer hesitated, then shrugged. Sold to Mr. McAllister. Come collect your property. Ada's heart pounded as Eli approached. She braced herself for rough hands, for cruel words, but instead he simply nodded and offered his arm. Let's get you out of here. She took it, surprised by the gentleness in his touch. The crowd melted away, and together they walked down the street, past the general store and the saloon, out toward the open land where the sky stretched forever. They didn't speak until they reached Eli's wagon, hitched to a sturdy bay horse. He helped her up, then climbed in beside her, taking the reins in his calloused hands. Ada glanced at him, searching his face for any sign of what he wanted from her. "Why did you buy me?" she asked quietly. Eli kept his eyes on the road. "You looked like you needed a way out." "I had $1. Seemed like a fair trade." She studied him, unsure whether to trust his words. "You know what they say about me, don't you?" He nodded. "I've heard talk. Folks say you can't have children. That true?" Ada's throat tightened. She looked away, blinking back tears. "That's what the doctor said. After my husband died, I tried for years. Nothing ever happened. People think I'm broken." Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "People say a lot of things. Most of them aren't worth listening to." They rode in silence, the wheels creaking over the rutted road. The land opened up around them, rolling hills, wildflowers nodding in the breeze, the distant shimmer of a creek. Ada felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease just a little. When they reached the ranch, Eli helped her down and led her inside. The house was simple but clean, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh bread in the air. "This is your home now," he said. "You can rest or help with chores if you want. I won't ask more than you're willing to give." Ada nodded, her heart aching with gratitude and confusion. She'd expected to be used, to be treated like property. Instead, she was being offered kindness, and it unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. That night, as she lay in a small room at the back of the house, Ada stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the distant bark of a dog, the soft creak of the windmill. She wondered what her life would be now, what Eli expected, and whether she could ever be more than what the world had decided she was. In the days that followed, Ada settled into the rhythms of ranch life. She rose early, helped with breakfast, learned to milk the cow and gather eggs. Eli worked alongside her, never asking for more than she could give, always treating her with respect. They spoke little at first, but slowly, a quiet companionship grew between them. Ada found herself laughing at Eli's dry humor, sharing stories of her childhood, listening as he spoke of the land and the seasons and the dreams he'd once had. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Ada paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "You never answered my question," she said softly. "Why did you really buy me?" Eli looked at her, his eyes serious. Because I know what it's like to be alone. To feel like you don't belong anywhere. I thought maybe we could help each other. Ada felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope, fragile but real. She nodded, unable to speak. As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Ada realized that for the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. But as the days turned to weeks, Ada's old fears crept back in. She saw the way the townsfolk looked at her when she came to market, heard the whispers that followed her down the street. She wondered if Eli regretted his choice, if he wished he'd spent his dollar on something, someone else. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance, Ada turned to Eli, her voice trembling. You know I can't give you a family. If you want to send me away, I'll understand. Eli shook his head, his gaze steady. I didn't buy you for what you could give me. I bought you because I saw someone worth saving. And I don't plan on letting you go. Ada's eyes filled with tears. But this time they were tears of relief. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. The summer days on Eli's ranch were long and golden, filled with the honest work that left Ada's hands rough and her heart lighter than it had been in years. She found comfort in the simple routines, feeding the chickens at dawn, kneading bread in the warm kitchen, tending the garden as the sun climbed high. Eli was always nearby, his presence steady and reassuring, never demanding, always patient. As the weeks passed, Ada began to feel a sense of belonging she'd never known before. The house, once just a shelter, started to feel like a home. She hung curtains in the windows, planted wildflowers by the front steps, and filled the rooms with the scent of fresh baking. Eli noticed every change, his quiet approval showing in the small, rare smiles he gave her. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the barn, Eli paused, leaning on his pitchfork. You've made this place brighter, Ada. I didn't realize how lonely it was until you came. Ada blushed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. I'm grateful to be here. I never thought I'd have a place like this again. Eli nodded, his gaze thoughtful. You deserve it. Everyone does. Their days settled into a gentle rhythm, but Ada's old fears lingered at the edges. She saw the way the women in town looked at her, the way their conversations hushed when she passed. She heard the whispers about her past, about her condition, about what kind of woman she must be to end up sold for $1. One morning, as Ada walked to the well, she overheard two women talking near the fence. Their voices were low, but the words carried. Poor Eli. He could have had any woman, but he bought her. And she can't even give him a child. Ada's cheeks burned. She hurried back to the house, her heart heavy. That night she sat on the porch staring at the stars, her thoughts tangled and dark. Eli joined her, sitting quietly for a long time before speaking. You hear them, don't you? The things they say. Ada nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I try not to let it bother me, but it does. Eli reached over, covering her hand with his. People talk. They always will. But they don't know you. They don't know what you've been through or how strong you are. Ada looked at him, searching his face for any sign of regret. Do you ever wish you'd chosen someone else? Someone who could give you a family? Eli shook his head, his grip gentle but firm. I chose you, Ada. Not for what you could give me, but for who you are. I don't need anything else. Tears pricked Ada's eyes, but she smiled, the weight on her chest easing just a little. As the days grew warmer, Ada and Eli grew closer. Their conversations deepened, moving from the practical to the personal. Ada told Eli about her childhood, about the dream she'd once had of a big family, a house full of laughter. Eli shared stories of his own, of growing up on the ranch, of losing his parents to fever, of the long, lonely years that followed. One evening, as they sat together after supper, Ada found herself laughing at one of Eli's stories. The sound surprised her. It had been so long since she'd laughed like that, so long since she'd felt truly happy. Eli watched her, his eyes warm. I like hearing you laugh, he said softly. Ada blushed, looking down at her hands. I like laughing with you. A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the soft sounds of the night, the chirp of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the gentle rustle of the wind in the trees. Eli cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. Ada, I know we started this arrangement in a strange way, but I want you to know You're not here out of obligation. You're free to leave if you ever want to. Ada shook her head, her voice steady. I don't want to leave. I want to stay. With you. Eli smiled, relief and happiness mingling in his eyes. Then stay. As long as you want. The days slipped by, each one a little brighter than the last. Ada found herself looking forward to the mornings, to the quiet moments with Eli, to the sense of purpose she felt in every task. She began to hope just a little that maybe, someday she could be more than just a helper, more than just a woman with a broken past. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Eli paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Ada, would you walk with me down to the creek? She nodded, curious. They strolled together through the tall grass, the sun warm on their backs, the world quiet and peaceful. When they reached the water's edge, Eli stopped, turning to face her. I know I'm not a man of many words, he began, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've brought life back to this place and to me. I'd be honored if you'd stay, not just as a helper, but as my wife. Ada's breath caught. She stared at Eli, her heart pounding. Are you sure? Eli stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I'm sure. I want you, Ada, all of you. Whatever the future holds, we'll face it together. Tears filled Ada's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. She nodded, unable to speak, and Eli pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the sun dipped low on the horizon. They walked back to the house hand in hand, the world transformed by hope. That night, as Ada lay in bed, she let herself dream of a future she'd thought was lost, a future filled with love, with laughter, with the promise of new beginnings. But even as happiness bloomed, a quiet ache remained. She wondered if she could ever truly give Eli the family he deserved, or if the shadow of her past would always linger. Still, for the first time in years, Ada dared to hope. The wedding was a simple affair, held beneath the wide blue sky with only the wind and the wildflowers as witnesses. Eli wore his best shirt, freshly pressed, and Ada wore a dress she'd sewn herself, pale yellow and soft as butter. They stood together by the old oak tree at the edge of the pasture, hands joined, hearts full. Eli spoke his vows in a voice rough with emotion. I promise to stand by you, Ada, through every storm and every sunrise. You are my home, my hope, and my heart. Ada's voice trembled as she answered. I promise to love you, Eli, with all that I am. You saved me when I thought I was lost. I will spend my life trying to give you the happiness you've given me. They exchanged rings, simple bands of silver, forged by Eli himself in the quiet hours before dawn. When the vows were done, Eli kissed Ada, gentle and sure, and the world seemed to pause, holding its breath for their happiness. Afterward, they shared a meal at the kitchen table, laughing and telling stories, the house filled with a warmth Ada had never known. That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Ada felt a peace settle over her, soft and deep. Eli's arms around her were strong and safe, and for the first time she let herself believe in forever. The days that followed were golden. Ada and Eli worked side by side, their love growing in the quiet moments, over morning coffee in the hush of twilight, in the laughter that echoed through the house. Ada found herself humming as she worked, her heart light, her spirit free. But as the weeks passed, Ada's old fears crept back in. She watched the other women in town, their bellies round with new life, their arms full of children. She saw the way Eli's eyes lingered on the families at church, the way his smile softened when he watched a father toss his child into the air. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Ada turned to Eli, her voice barely more than a whisper. Do you ever wish things were different? That we could have a child of our own? Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over, taking her hand in his. I'd be lying if I said I never thought about it. But I have you, Ada. That's more than I ever hoped for. Ada nodded, but the ache in her heart remained. She wanted to give Eli everything, to fill their home with laughter and life. But every month, hope faded, replaced by the familiar sting of disappointment. One afternoon, as Ada worked in the garden, she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She sat down, pressing a hand to her forehead, her heart pounding. Eli found her there, worry etched on his face. Are you all right? He asked, kneeling beside her. Ada nodded, forcing a smile. Just tired, I think. Maybe I worked too long in the sun. Eli helped her inside, making her rest on the sofa while he brought her cool water and a damp cloth for her brow. He fussed over her, his concern clear, and Ada felt a surge of love for the man who had given her so much. As the days passed, Ada's fatigue lingered. She lost her appetite, felt queasy in the mornings, and found herself weeping over small things. She tried to hide it from Eli, not wanting to worry him, but he noticed. One morning, as Ada sat at the kitchen table, Eli placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ada, I think you should see Doc Harper." Just to be sure. Ada hesitated, fear and hope warring inside her. She'd seen the doctor before, heard the same words. "I'm sorry, Ada, but it's unlikely you'll ever conceive." She didn't want to hear it again, didn't want to see the pity in his eyes, but Eli was insistent. And so with a heavy heart, Ada agreed. They rode into town together, the journey quiet and tense. Doc Harper greeted them with a kind smile, ushering Ada into his office while Eli waited outside. The examination was quick, the questions familiar. Ada braced herself for disappointment, for the gentle shake of the doctor's head. But this time, Doc Harper's face broke into a wide grin. "Ada, I think you're going to have a baby." Ada stared at him, unable to believe what she'd heard. "But I was told I couldn't." The doctor nodded, his eyes warm. "Sometimes the body surprises us. You're healthy, Ada. Everything looks good." Tears filled Ada's eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she laughed and sobbed all at once. She rushed outside, finding Eli waiting on the porch. He stood as she approached, worry etched deep in his brow. What did he say? Ada threw her arms around him, her voice trembling with joy. "Eli, I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Eli just stared at her, disbelief and hope warring in his eyes. Then he swept her into his arms, spinning her around as laughter and tears mingled on his face. They rode home together, the world transformed by hope. Ada's heart soared, her fears melting away in the warmth of Eli's love. That night, as they lay together beneath the stars, Ada whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, for loving me, even when I couldn't love myself." Eli kissed her forehead, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a reason to hope again, Ada. You gave me a family." As the days passed, Ada's belly grew round, her laughter brighter. The house filled with preparations, tiny clothes sewn by Ada's careful hands, a cradle built by Eli, lullabies sung in the quiet hours before dawn. The townsfolk, once so quick to judge, now offered smiles and congratulations. Ada felt their acceptance, their warmth, and knew she had finally found her place. But as the months passed, Ada's old fears returned. She worried for the baby, for Eli, for the fragile happiness they'd built. She prayed every night, her hands folded over her growing belly, asking for strength, for courage, for the chance to see her child's face. And as the first snows fell, blanketing the ranch in white, Ada knew that whatever the future held, she was ready, because she was no longer broken. She was whole. Winter settled over the ranch with a quiet intensity, turning the fields to silver and the air crisp and sharp. Ada moved more slowly now, her belly round and heavy, but her spirit was light. Each morning Eli helped her into her coat and boots, insisting she take care, and each evening, he read to her by the fire, his deep voice filling the room with warmth. The townsfolk, once so quick to judge, now stopped by with gifts, jars of preserves, knitted blankets, tiny booties for the baby. Ada accepted each one with gratitude, her heart swelling with the kindness she'd once thought impossible. She and Eli were no longer outsiders. They were part of the fabric of Willow Bend, woven in by hope and perseverance. As the days grew shorter, Ada found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the auction block, the shame and fear, the way Eli's gentle hand had changed everything. She remembered the long, lonely nights, the ache of wanting a family, the pain of believing she was broken. Now, as she sat by the window watching snowflakes drift past the glass, she felt only gratitude. Eli was tireless in his care. He chopped extra wood, stocked the pantry, and made sure Ada never wanted for anything. He built a cradle from oak, carving tiny wildflowers into the headboard, and painted the nursery a soft, hopeful yellow. Every night he knelt by the bed, his hands resting on Ada's belly, whispering promises to the child growing inside her. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Ada reached for Eli's hand. "Are you scared?" she asked softly. Eli squeezed her fingers, his eyes gentle. "A little. But I'm more grateful than anything. I never thought I'd have this, a family, a home, a future. Ada smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Me neither. I used to think I was cursed. But you showed me I was just waiting for the right kind of love. They sat together in the quiet, the fire crackling, the world outside fading away. As the weeks passed, Ada's anticipation grew. She spent hours preparing for the baby, folding tiny clothes, humming lullabies, dreaming of the life they would share. She wrote letters to her child, tucking them away in a box, a record of hope, of longing, of the love that had brought them all together. But as her due date approached, Ada's fears returned. She worried about the birth, about the pain, about the possibility that something could go wrong. She remembered the doctor's warnings, the years of disappointment, the shadow of loss that had always followed her. Eli noticed her anxiety and did his best to reassure her. "You're strong, Ada, stronger than anyone I know. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Ada nodded, drawing strength from his words, but the fear lingered. One night, as a blizzard raged outside, Ada woke to a sharp pain in her belly. She sat up, breathless, her heart pounding. Another pain followed, stronger this time, and she knew. The baby was coming. She called for Eli, her voice trembling. He was at her side in an instant, his face pale but determined. He helped her to the bed, stoked the fire, and boiled water, his hands steady even as his eyes betrayed his worry. The hours that followed were long and hard. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and snow piled high against the door. Ada gritted her teeth, riding each wave of pain, her hands clutching Eli's for strength. He whispered encouragement, wiped her brow, and never left her side. As dawn broke, painting the sky with the faintest blush of pink, Ada's cries filled the house. With one final push, the baby arrived, a tiny, perfect girl, her lungs strong, her fists waving in the air. Ada wept with relief and joy as Eli placed the baby in her arms. She counted every finger, every toe, marveling at the miracle she held. Eli knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face, his hands trembling as he touched his daughter's cheek. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "just like her mother." Ada smiled, exhaustion and happiness mingling in her eyes. "We did it, Eli, we really did it." They named her Hope, a name that carried the weight of all they had endured and the promise of all that was to come. The days that followed were a blur of wonder and exhaustion. Ada and Eli took turns rocking Hope, singing to her, marveling at every new sound and movement. The townsfolk came to visit, bringing gifts and congratulations, their faces alight with genuine happiness. Ada felt a peace she had never known, a sense of completeness that filled every corner of her heart. She watched Eli with their daughter, saw the tenderness in his eyes, the way he cradled Hope as if she were the most precious thing in the world. One afternoon, as Ada sat by the window, Hope sleeping in her arms, she thought back to the day Eli had bought her for $1. She remembered the shame, the fear, the sense of being unwanted. Now as she looked at her family, she knew that dollar had been the best investment Eli had ever made. But even as happiness bloomed, Ada knew life would not always be easy. There would be challenges, hardships, and days when fear returned. But she also knew that together they could face anything. As winter melted into spring, the ranch came alive with new growth. Wildflowers bloomed, calves were born, and the world seemed to sing with possibility. Ada and Eli worked side by side, their love deepening with every shared sunrise and storm. And every night, as they tucked Hope into her cradle, Ada whispered a prayer of thanks, for second chances, for unexpected miracles, and for the love that had saved them both. Spring brought a new kind of energy to the ranch. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming wildflowers, and the fields shimmered with fresh green grass. Ada found herself waking each morning with a sense of wonder, her heart full as she watched Hope grow stronger every day. Hope was a bright, curious baby, her eyes wide and alert, her tiny hands always reaching for the world around her. Ada spent hours singing to her, telling her stories and marveling at the miracle she held. Eli was just as smitten, carrying Hope in the crook of his arm as he did chores, introducing her to the horses, the chickens, and the gentle old dog who followed him everywhere. The ranch, once so quiet and lonely, was now alive with laughter and life. Ada and Eli worked together, their partnership deepening with every passing day. They shared the burdens and the joys, the sleepless nights and the sunlit afternoons. building a life that was richer than either had ever dreamed. But even as happiness blossomed, Ada's old insecurities sometimes crept back in. She worried about being a good mother, about living up to the gift she'd been given. She watched the other women in town, their easy confidence, their bustling homes full of children, and wondered if she truly belonged among them. One afternoon, as Ada walked into town with Hope bundled in her arms, she passed a group of women gathered outside the general store. They smiled and waved, calling her over. "Let us see that beautiful baby," one of them exclaimed, reaching out to touch Hope's soft cheek. Ada hesitated, but the warmth in their eyes was genuine. She let them fuss over Hope, answering their questions, accepting their compliments. For the first time, she felt truly welcomed, not as an outsider, but as a mother, a neighbor, a friend. As she made her way home, Ada's heart was light. She realized that the walls she'd built around herself were beginning to crumble, replaced by a sense of belonging she'd never known. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and pink, Ada and Eli sat on the porch, Hope sleeping in Ada's arms. They watched the sky, the world quiet and peaceful. Eli reached over, brushing a strand of hair from Ada's face. "You're a wonderful mother, Ada. I see the way you love her, the way you care for her. I couldn't have asked for more." Ada smiled, her eyes shining. "I was so afraid, Eli, afraid I'd never be enough, but you believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." Eli squeezed her hand, his voice soft. "You're more than enough. You're everything." They sat together in the fading light, the world around them full of promise. As the weeks passed, Ada grew more confident in her role as a mother and a wife. She learned to trust herself, to trust Eli, to trust the love that had brought them together. She found joy in the small moments, Hope's first smile, the way Eli's eyes lit up when he came in from the fields, the laughter that filled their home. But life on the ranch was not without its challenges. There were storms that battered the fields, sickness that swept through the cattle, and days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. Ada and Eli faced each trial together, their bond growing stronger with every hardship. One night, a fierce thunderstorm rolled in, shaking the house with wind and rain. Hope woke, crying, her tiny body trembling with fear. Ada held her close, singing softly, her own heart pounding with worry. Eli joined them, wrapping his arms around both Ada and Hope, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. Together they weathered the night, finding comfort in each other's strength. When morning came, the world was washed clean, the air fresh and sweet. Ada stood on the porch, Hope in her arms, watching the sun rise over the fields. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trials that had tested her, for the love that had saved her, for the family she'd thought she'd never have. As summer approached, Ada and Eli began to dream of the future. They talked of expanding the ranch, of planting more crops, of building a bigger house to hold the laughter and love that filled their days. They spoke of giving Hope siblings, of raising a family together, of growing old side by side. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Eli paused, looking at Ada with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how far we've come? From that day at the auction to this?" Ada smiled, her heart full. "Every day. I never imagined a life like this. I never imagined I could be so happy." Eli pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You deserve every bit of it." "Ada, we both do." They stood together in the sunlight, Hope giggling in Ada's arms, the world wide open before them. But even as they dreamed of the future, Ada knew that life would bring more challenges, more heartache, more moments of doubt. She also knew that together they could face anything, because love, real, hard-won love, was stronger than fear, stronger than the past, stronger than anything the world could throw at them. And as the days grew longer and the fields bloomed with new life, Ada whispered a prayer of thanks for the journey that had brought her here, for the man who had seen her worth, and for the miracle that had made her whole. The heat of summer settled over Willow Bend, bringing with it long days and warm, starlit nights. The ranch thrived under Ada and Eli's care, fields heavy with grain, cattle fat and content, the garden bursting with vegetables and flowers. Hope grew quickly, her laughter ringing through the house, her tiny feet chasing after the old dog in the yard. Ada often found herself pausing in the middle of her chores, simply to watch her daughter play. Each giggle, each new word, each sleepy smile was a miracle she never took for granted. She marveled at the way Hope's small hand fit perfectly in hers. at the way Eli's eyes softened every time he looked at their child. The ache of her old fears faded, replaced by a deep, abiding joy. But life, as always, was not without its shadows. One afternoon, as Ada hung laundry in the sun, she noticed a stranger riding up the lane. A man in a fine coat, his horse sleek and well-groomed. He tipped his hat as he approached, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth. "I'm looking for Eli McAllister." Ada's heart skipped. She called for Eli, who came from the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans. The stranger introduced himself as Mr. Harlan, a lawyer from the city. "I've come with news," he said, glancing at Ada and Hope. "It concerns your family." Eli's jaw tightened. "What kind of news?" Mr. Harlan explained that Eli's distant uncle had passed away, leaving behind a large estate, land, cattle, and a sum of money. "You're the sole heir," he said. "It's a great opportunity, Mr. McAllister. You could move to the city, live in comfort. Leave all this behind." Eli looked at Ada, then at Hope, then back at the land that had been his home for so long. He shook his head. "Thank you, but this is where I belong. My family is here. My life is here." Mr. Harlan pressed, offering promises of wealth and ease, but Eli stood firm. "Money can't buy what we have," he said quietly. "Not love, not peace, not the feeling of waking up every morning beside the people I love most." The lawyer left, disappointed, and Ada felt a surge of pride for the man she'd married. That night, as they sat on the porch, Ada rested her head on Eli's shoulder. "You could have had anything," she whispered. "Why choose this?" Eli kissed her hair, his voice gentle. "Because you and Hope are everything. This ranch, this life, it's ours. We built it together. I wouldn't trade it for all the gold in the world." Ada smiled, her heart full. She knew then, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the summer wore on, Ada and Eli faced new challenges. Drought, a sick calf, a storm that tore shingles from the roof. But each trial only brought them closer, their love a steady anchor in the shifting tides of life. Hope took her first steps in the soft grass behind the house, her laughter echoing across the fields. Ada wept with joy, holding her daughter close, marveling at the miracle she'd once thought impossible. The townsfolk, once so quick to judge, now looked to Ada and Eli as examples of resilience and hope. Neighbors came for advice, for comfort, for the warmth that seemed to radiate from their home. Ada welcomed them all, her heart open, her spirit generous. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, Ada and Eli sat together, watching Hope chase fireflies in the yard. "Do you ever think about that day?" Ada asked softly. "The day you bought me for $1? Eli smiled, his eyes shining with love. "Every day. Best dollar I ever spent." Ada laughed, the sound bright and free. "I used to think I was broken, that I'd never be whole. But you showed me that love can heal even the deepest wounds." Eli took her hand, his grip warm and sure. "You healed me too, Ada. You gave me a reason to hope again." They sat in silence, the world around them peaceful and still. The stars blinked to life overhead, and the air was filled with the scent of wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. As the years passed, Ada and Eli's family grew. Hope was joined by a little brother, then a sister. Each child a testament to the power of faith and love. The house rang with laughter. The fields echoed with the sound of children's voices, and the ranch flourished under their care. Ada never forgot the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the fear, the long road to happiness. She carried those memories with her, not as burdens, but as reminders of how far she'd come. And every night, as she tucked her children into bed, Ada whispered a prayer of thanks for second chances, for the man who had seen her worth, and for the family she'd once thought she'd never have. If you're listening to this story, wherever you are, remember, hope can bloom in the unlikeliest of places. Love can heal what the world says is broken. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a single dollar, a gentle hand, can change a life forever. Now tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what gives you hope even when the world feels lost?